And now joining us is the voice of the Utes, friend of the program. We've known him a long time. His name's Bill Riley on the Deseret First Credit Union hotline. Bill, how you doing this morning?
Jarom, I'm good. Some have known us longer than others, right, Jarom? Back to the Copper Hills days,
Yes,
right?
yes. Late 90s, early 2000s when you came from Jacksonville. You actually wrote a letter of recommendation for a scholarship that I didn't get, I want to bring up, at BYU.
I apologize if the letter wasn't quite good enough.
I wish that was the reason. Yeah. Okay, we're 50 days out from BYU and Utah. I guess what emotions come to mind when you think about, hey, this is just around the corner?
I was just talking to your executive producer, my friend Ben Bagley, and saying I can't believe that we are 50 days away. And I don't know where time flies. It used to feel like summer was interminable, that we couldn't wait till the beginning of camp. And then, I mean, we're like less than 3 weeks away from the start of camp, much less the season, which is 50 days away. So I think it's great. I don't know about you guys. I love the fact that the game's the first game of the year now. I know a lot of people say, oh, it should be at the end of the year, and I'm sure Brian feels that way because that's where it was when he played. But we know things are different now. The schools are in different places. I just love the game still being played, and if it can't be played at the end of the year, play it at the beginning. We have all summer to hype it up, and then you get it out of the way, and then you can turn your attention to other things, and everybody's healthy, and so I'm just excited for it.
I actually like it to be in the beginning versus the end of the season. I'm with you, man. I think the biggest thing is the injuries, right, and the health. I think this is a true testament of how good these programs either one can be or the hard work that they've done, up until that point. There's no game film that you can really watch except for the previous year.
Well, they did play 2 games ago.
Well, yeah, but when you have different coaches and players and things like that,
it's all
really
the same people. It's all the same people.
There's different little wrinkles and things like that. It's hard to really get a good grasp. Anyway, I do agree with you. I like it to be in the very first game for the season. Now, when we think about last year, we almost had you guys. I thought the curse of Max Hall was going to be broken. We came back down 20, or you guys came back. You guys were down 20. Were you a little bit nervous as the game was rolling out?
Well, I mean, I don't know how you couldn't be a little nervous. You're down 20 late in the third quarter. I thought that I had Julian Blackmon on my show yesterday, and I felt like the game maybe turned when he picked off Zach Wilson, but then BYU went right back down the field and scored again to make it 27-7. So, yeah, I mean, you've got your backup quarterback who's never been in that situation, got your backup tailback, and your defense, which has been lights out, it's given up 27 points. So, yeah, there wasn't a lot of – I mean, you guys were at the stadium that day. There wasn't a whole lot of life in Rice-Eccles Stadium, and there wasn't a whole lot of reason to think, yeah, things are going to be better. And then things kicked in. Jason Shelley started playing, and it was a whole lot better. But, yeah, there were some nervous moments late third quarter, early fourth quarter last year at Rice-Eccles.
Let's talk about this year's group in 2019. A lot of preseason hype for this Utah squad that went to the Pac-12 title game last year, returns a lot of the major pieces. Is this the best team from Utah going into the season, in your opinion, in the Pac-12 era?
Oh, there's no doubt about that, Jeremy. It might be the best team going into a season of the Kyle Whittingham era, too, and that includes 2008, the undefeated team. They've never had more talent 1 through 85. Even that 2008 team, which was really, really good, put a bunch of guys in the NFL. They weren't as deep as this particular team. And that was a team that got to play a Mountain West Conference schedule. It didn't have to play a Pac-12 schedule. And I think we saw it on display last year. We were just talking about the BYU game, but it was the Oregon game and the Colorado game before that, and then the Pac-12 championship game. You play without your starting quarterback, and you play without your all-conference tailback, and we're still able to get it done down the stretch. And I think that was a testament to the depth and the talent that Whittingham and his staff have recruited to. And coming back this year, I mean, there was a good chance that, Julian Blackmon, Jalen Johnson, Lecky Fotu, Bradley, and I were all going to go play in the league. They would have all been drafted in the NFL, depending on, what grade they got. They would have all been drafted. They chose to come back. Getting those guys back, getting Huntley and Moss back with this football team are huge, huge boost to go with some talent that was already there. And I think the unsung move in the offseason is the return of Andy Ludwig at offensive coordinator. I've joked repeatedly that ever since Andy left after the 2008 season 10 years ago, Kyle Whittingham's been in search of Andy Ludwig. And that's who he's wanted. He's wanted Andy. He has to be able to find him, and then Andy's cut. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why there's kind of been a little bit of a revolving door at offensive coordinator, because Kyle knew what he wanted in an offensive coordinator. It was Andy Ludwig. And I think getting him back in Andy's style and his adaptive style, I think will be really good for this offense, really good for Kyle. But I think it'll be really good for Tyler Huntley, too, because I don't think you're going to see him exposed nearly as much in the spread offense as he was the last couple of years. He'll still be able to use his athleticism, but I don't think you're going to see him as many designed runs as maybe there were in Troy Taylor's offense.
Bill, in my experience playing rival games throughout my whole life, it didn't really matter about how good a team was, returning starters, players, records. We just completely threw them out the window because anything could happen. With the hype surrounding this team and the talent that you just mentioned, is it safe to assume that as well going into this game?
That nothing matters? I've always said –
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I think talent. I mean, I do think talent does matter. I think that sometimes a rivalry game can be a little bit of an equalizer on an emotional standpoint or front. But I do think talent. I don't think location matters. I've never really thought that playing that game in Provo or playing it in Salt Lake City really matters. Whether you play it in Columbus or Ann Arbor or wherever it might be with rivalry games. But I do think talent and experience matters, and I do think it matters when you've had guys that have been through the game before. So I do think Utah has a talent advantage in this game, whether they come out and play to that level of talent. And I do think, Brian, being the first game of the year, we know this. It's in the NFL where you have 2 or 3 preseason games to knock the rust off.
Right.
First games can be kind of weird when you haven't had that exhibition game or anything like that. So I think that Utah's a more talented team across the board and in a lot of key positions. But I will say this, playing it in the first game where last year maybe injuries without Moss and Huntley were a little bit of an equalizer, I think this year playing it in the first game makes it a little bit of an equalizer too, because you haven't had that game speed and game experience, which you can't simulate in a practice.
Yeah, it was weird the last game there. Both teams are playing with backup quarterbacks. Both teams are playing backup running backs. It was interesting. Now the full attention is on this game. I wanted to ask you about Britton Covey because tore his ACL meniscus in the Pac-12 title game. He played with a broken wrist. We find out later.
All year. All year, basically from the Washington game on, he was playing with a broken wrist.
That's wild. Is he expected to be ready for the BYU game, or will he join mid-season?
He told me that everything was on track to be ready to go with fall camp. I talked to him about a month ago,
Wow.
and he said the rehab was going really, really well. Now, that doesn't mean he'll be full speed by the beginning of fall camp. But I asked him, I said, are you expected to play against BYU? He said, I'm expecting to play against BYU. I'm not his doctor. I haven't seen it. I'm not running his rehab. I'm just going by what he told me in an interview. He said he's hoping and expecting to play against BYU.
That means he wants to. Not
Well, of course he does. The Provo kid, right? Yeah.
Well, he works hard. I think he's tough. Obviously, playing with a broken wrist and hand and whatnot. And I think it all comes down to the determination with the rehab, right? We've seen guys, within the program come back off of injuries like Taysom, right? Come back and we're like, what the heck? How'd you do that? So I hope so. It makes the rivalry, that much better and more entertaining to watch. Bill, today our question of the day is, what are you 50-50 about regarding the BYU football program? So we'll ask the same question to you regarding the Utah football program.
50, I don't know. But the question I have going into camp, though, is just how the offensive line pieces fit together. I think they know who 3 of their 5 guys are. Can you figure out who those other 2 guys are and how quickly can you do it into fall camp? I think Jim Harding likes the group he has, but he's got to figure out who, I think he's got his starting left tackle is Darren Paulo. I think his starting center is Orlando Umana. And Nick Ford's going to be a starter either at a guard or he could play right tackle. But then they've got a group of guys, some transfers, some JC guys, and some guys that didn't participate in the spring. They've got to figure out who slots into those other 2 places for me. I'm going to be honest, guys, and I'm not trying to be the homer here. There aren't very many. I'll tell you the other question is place kicker, which is weird to say at Utah because they've had all-conference and all-American place kickers for the last 12 years. They don't have a definitive place kicker today either. So BYU, and this is weird to say too, may go into that game with the more proven kicker. When was the last time we could say that?
Yeah,
Matt
and
Cain,
even
maybe?
then, there's going to be a battle for that spot here.
Oh, is there? Okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
so it's not necessarily Skylar Southam right now.
Not necessarily. No, Jake. What's it? I'm blanking. Oldroyd is back from a mission and will compete for that spot. But yeah, no one breaks down kickers
so we
like
may be
BYU
going back
Sports
to the
Nation.
days of the early '90s where we don't if the game comes down to a kick.
Exactly.
34-31. So let me flip one on you guys now, because here's the question I'm throwing out today. If you guys could pick one guy off of the Utah roster to plug into Utah, into BYU squad, who would you pick? Either side of the football.
Zach Moss.
That's a very good and quick answer, Brian.
Yeah, that's. I mean, it's no question. It's just.
Yeah.
That's not even.
If it's not Zach, I'm probably going with Lecky Fotu or Bradley and I, just to have a little more oomph on the defensive line. I think BYU's got some.
Could you imagine Lecky Fotu and Kyrus Tonga playing side by side?
I can,
Holy
and they
cow.
almost did at Utah, right? Yeah. I want to ask you.
I'm going with Brady. I'm going with Brady Christensen, and I'm going to play him at right tackle.
Yeah, he's freshman All-American, graded out really well last year. Fantastic. I want to ask about the defense.
Yeah, I just like him because he's got reps. The guys Utah might have, I think Utah's got some guys, but Brady's a proven commodity, and I think he's got a huge, bright future at BYU, don't you guys?
Yeah, he could be a four-year guy that's playing the NFL. Excited about him. So defensively, that defensive line, Fotu and I, Pennicini, awesome. On the back end, Jalen Johnson, Julian Blackman, fantastic. I guess the questions defensively for Utah might come at linebacker. Obviously, Francis Bernard there, Mika Tufua, a couple of kind of former Cougs in a way. Who replaces Cody Barton and Chase Hansen at linebacker?
Well, it's going to be Francis is one of those guys. We all kind of thought Francis would be the guy last year, that Cody would start the year, but Cody was he's so good. Francis ended up being the third linebacker, but it'll be Francis and Manny Bowen, and Manny was a 2-year starter at Penn State. So those two guys. The third linebacker, it'll be interesting, but I think it's going to be Devin Lloyd. He was a freshman, a redshirt freshman a year ago. He's really, really good. He's kind of a thicker, taller version of Stevenson Sylvester, if you remember Sly from that 07-08 teams who played for the Steelers for a little while. He's really, really good. So they've got three linebackers. Sione Lund, who was a Brighton High kid, went to Stanford's come back. He's working his way in at linebacker. They got a transfer kid, an LDS kid from UCLA, Mike Juarez, who was the number one linebacker in the nation a few years ago.
Yep.
He had concussion issues at UCLA, never really got on the field. He was a Jim Mora, not a Chip Kelly guy. If he can get eligible, he'll be in the mix. He may have some grade stuff that he has to finish up this summer. He may end up taking a year and a half, 2 to play, but he'd be in the mix too. But your two starting linebackers are going to be Bowen and Francis Bernard.
Okay, good stuff. We look forward to 50 days from today, BYU and Utah, Bill. We always appreciate the time, and thanks again for your letter of recommendation.
Hey, anytime, Jarom, Brian, good talking to you, and tell Linton that there's no days off when you hit 50 days. His slacking is really disappointing to me.
Yeah, I was gone last week, so whatever. Thanks, Bill.
See you guys.
That's Bill Riley on the Deseret First Credit Union hotline. Deseret First, your values, your timeline, your financial future.